So in this video we will be talking about React hooks. Right now we are in the voting file, voting folder. Let's head back to practice app, and there we'll be learning about React hooks. So let's go to file and open folder, that will be practice app. I'm going to select this folder, and right here I'm going to be explaining about React hooks, and I'll be showing you all the basic hooks that we're going to do. So now, what are React hooks? React hooks are inbuilt functions that allow React developers to use state and lifecycle methods inside functional components. So what this means is that we are not allowed to use functional components. We're not supposed to use state in a functional component, but React hooks allows us to do that. And they also work together with the existing code, so they can easily be adopted into a code base. The way hooks were pitched to the public was that they allowed developers to use state in functional components, but under the hood, hooks are much more powerful than that. They allow React developers to enjoy improved code reuse, better code composition, better defaults, and all that. Now, the motivation behind the release of React hooks was, according to React.js official documentation, reusing stateful logic between components is difficult, and complex components can be difficult to understand. Classes are quite confusing for both the machine as well as the users, and that was the motivation behind React hooks. Now, there are a few rules of hooks. There are two main rules actually, and make sure to not use hooks inside loops, conditions, or nested functions. We cannot use hooks inside of loops, conditions, or nested functions. Only use hooks from inside React functions. We cannot use it in React classes. We can use hooks only in React functions. Now, let a basic React hooks are use state, use effect, use context, and use reducer. So let's talk about use state. Now here we can create a new one, or we can go to app.js, and we can do it right here because we haven't really done anything. So first let's clear out logo and everything else, and we'll clear out the return statement as well. So this must be left in your app.js. We can remove the CSS importing the CSS as well. You can save this. I'm just going to close this. Now it makes it better. So here I'm going to explain about the different hooks. So first let's start off with the use state. The use state hook allows React developers to update, handle, and manipulate state inside of functional component without needing to convert it to a class component. So in case you want to use state in your React app, you don't have to convert the functional component to a class component to use state. We can use something called as the use state hook. Now let's use the code snippet that I'm going to show you right now to understand more about hooks. So to begin with, Reacts were added to make it more easier for us. So let's start off, and here let's say use state, and you can open and close the brackets. That is your use state hook. This will be the use state hook right here. And now before we do anything with this, let's first introduce a variable called count, and let's return some value. And here, now please don't get confused, this return statement is for the function. Now okay, let's just make it this way. So let's put the use state inside of our variable that we've introduced. So that's how it is. So const count is equal to use state. So we're putting the use state hook inside of a variable. I'm going to put 0 right here. I'll explain this in a moment. And let's give it a div, and inside of the div I'm going to give a p tag where I'm going to say you clicked 0 times, and right here I am going, so this is a function called app. I'm naming the function as app, and inside of this I'm going to introduce a variable called count, and useState is the hook. Now here useState is a hook. We call it inside a function component to add some local state to it. Now we're calling it inside the function component to add some state to it. React will preserve the state between re-renders. Now useState returns a pair, the current state value and a function that lets you update it. You can call this function from an event handler or somewhere else. It's similar to this.setState, except it does not merge the old and the new state together. Now I'll show you how it works. So now we know what comes back from the use state, that is right here. What comes back is an array of 2 items. Looks like we have only 1 item, so it returns 2 items. The first is the current state value. What is the current state value? That will be 0, right? And the second item is the function we call in order to update that state. So the initial state is 0, and to update it we use set state. So instead of that, there will be 2 variables here, 2 items in the array that will return the second. The second is a function that we can call in order to update the state. Now accessing the items of an array like that is really tedious and annoying, so let's not do that. Now I'll show you what I mean. Let's say count 0, right? And here the value is, it's not wrong to do this. So I am accessing, so it gives us 2 arrays. So useState has, it is an array. Now here when we save this, let's go ahead and start our server. Now we have run it and it is showing something else. It is showing us our forms that we created earlier. So we are probably rendering the wrong thing. Let's go check that out. So let's head over to our index.js. We can see that it's our name form and all that we have imported. So we can remove the entire thing. You can save it elsewhere, or you can comment it out. But I am going to remove them from here to here, and I am going to import app from app, that is the file app. I'm going to import the function component that is app, and I'm going to render it right here and save this. So it is giving us an error. It says useState is not defined. So let's head back to our app.js, and whenever we use the useState hook, we need to call useState. So here, right after React, we need to import useState. So open the brackets and close the brackets, and inside of this you're going to say useState, and we can save this, and now it should be working perfectly fine. So head over to your Google Chrome and go to your local host 3000. It says you clicked 0 times, where this is coming from the useState. Now because we are accessing it like this. Now let me tell you something, that it was one of the latest updates related to hooks. It is a new addition to React 16.8. They let you use state and other React features without writing a class. So you can head over to your package.json, and here you can see that your React version is 16.13.1. So it does allow hooks to be used inside of the application. But if it is below 16.8, we are at 16.13. But if it is below 16.8, we cannot use React. So the Create React app, obviously, that you have installed now will be maybe on a newer version, or it will be 16.13. But it won't be anything under 16.8, so don't worry about that. Now the more common way of the more common pattern is to destructure an array. So what we can do is we can put it inside an array, and right here we don't have to call the 0th index, we can just call the count, and it will be working perfectly fine. Now what we want to do is add a button right here. When we click the button, it has to change, it has to increase, so from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I know we have done this earlier, but we are doing this with related to hooks, and we're using useState to do it. So this will be quite interesting. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's first add a button right here after the p tag. Let's give it a button and on click event handler, and we will give add one method to it. We will introduce the add one method right here in just a moment. Now that will be click here, and inside of the brackets I'm going to say +1, and it will increase by 1 each time we click. Now let's introduce the method, and that will be right after our useState. Let's say const add 1 is equal to, let's use the arrow functions and let us increase the value. So how are we going to change the state? Before, if we used the class, we can set the first state to 0, and then we can use setState method to increase the value of state, right? But here we cannot do that. So instead of that, there is a much simpler way when we use hooks. So what we are going to do right now is we are going to say, so as I told you earlier, the first, there are two, it comes back with in an array of 2 items. The first is the current state value, that is the 0 value, that is the current state value. And the second is a function we can call in order to update the state. Now let's put the second value, which is a function that is called setCount, which is used to update the value of count. So this is the state and this is the setState. So it's as simple as, it's easy to think that way. Now inside of add one, let us change our, this is our function which is used to update our state. Now it is at 0. So how do we update our state? Our state is count +1. It is as simple as that. We don't have to use class, and class but doesn't mean it is obsolete, but we don't have to use class components and all of that here. Once this is done, we can save and go right here. You can see that it has shown up, and I am going to increase a little so that you can see it. Now if we click here, the value is increasing automatically. So you have successfully used setState, and instead of using setState and what is that state, you have successfully used useState hooks to do the same thing. So this is so much more simpler, reusable, and very small. Now what I want you to do is, instead of adding this method, we can you can do something like, don't have to on click, you don't have to go for a method, you can do it right here. Try doing it. I'm going to do it. You can pause it for now. If you have done it, well and good, but if you haven't, then let me show you how to do it. We can remove that and introduce an arrow function right here, and inside of this we can use the setCount function to increase our count value by +1. You don't have to introduce a method, we can just use setCount right inside of our on click event handler, and we can increase the value. It will be the same. You can see that the value is increasing. Now what I want to do is do the same thing, create another button where we can minus the value of count. Pause it and try it out. I hope you tried it. Now I am going to do it for you. So that will be button on click is equal to, I am going to introduce an arrow function, and inside of this I'm going to put 2 brackets and the arrow function, and right inside of that I am going to say setCount -1, and right inside of this I am going to say click here -1. You can go ahead and save this And when you head out to your Google Chrome localhost 3000, you can see here that click here +1 will increase your value and click here -1 will decrease your value. Right here you can see it happening. So we did this using useState and useState hook. And to use the useState hook, you need to, in here you have to import the useState library right from here. It is it's quite an interesting topic. Now what we can just have a small recap. You can slowly introduce this to your coding in as gradually. But what we did here is, now to do this add one, we have removed that function for now, but to do the add one method, we have to have access to the second item of the array, that is setCount. The first item is the current state value and the second item is a function that you can use to change the state value. That is what we did. Now if you wanted, you could define a function right inside of onClick, and that is what we have done. We can either introduce a function right inside of onClick, or we can put it outside and access it. Either one of them, but you've quite successfully used useState. Now let's learn about useEffect. How useEffect is nothing but like a life cycle, where we learned state and life cycle earlier. useEffect is nothing but something related to life cycle. So let's go right ahead and learn about that.